Frustrierende Champions. Vom schlechten Game Design bis guten Game Design. Lulu soll gut sein. Warte, Evelynn und Lulu sind gut und Shaco, Yuumi sind bad? Okay, also bei Yuumi agree ich. Bad und frustrierend. Aber bei Evelynn? Evelynn ist doch safe frustrierend und nicht gut. Like, what do you mean? Der Charakter wird gedraftet, du hast das Gefühl, du musst AFK gehen und sie kann überall die ganze Zeit sein. Ich bin gespannt auf die Begründung. Wir gehen rein.
We all have a handful of champions that we consider frustrating to play against. Okay, maybe it might be more than a handful, but just about everyone can name a few champs that make their blood boil at the mere sight of them on the enemy team. Some of them are disliked for personal reasons, while others are for more practical reasons. Thing is, the League community has a penchant for associating frustrating with being badly designed, implying that if a champion evokes any sort of irritation, they're a problem for the game. Understandable to some extent. If you're playing X champion and get counterpicked by Y champion, you spend most if not the entire game being unable to do pretty much anything, leading to a loss of agency and therefore having you believe you didn't lose because you got outplayed, but rather because they cheesed you. Frustration can be correlated with bad design and is most certainly a factor in evaluation, but if it was a causal reason, then by that logic all champions are badly designed, given someone out there feels that way towards a member of the cast. It's been a long time since I actually made a video on champion design, so I figured it would make for a fun topic to discuss what exactly is the difference between a well-designed frustrating champion and a badly designed one. So let's get started. Pinpointing the very fine line between good and bad design, especially when it comes to frustration, may be impossible to concretely locate, as it is an emotional thing, and emotions by nature are subjective. Person A might consider Wukong to be the most annoying thing in existence, while person B thinks Wukong is perfectly fine. This is notably difficult to ascertain when it comes to negative
Wukong zu spielen, wenn ich ihn so sehe. Einloggen und Black Move anfangen, Chat?
Emotions like frustration, which by definition means the feeling of being upset or annoyed, especially because of one's inability to change or achieve something. That second part is what matters, because of the inability to change or achieve something. Agency is a huge aspect of video games. You're presented with a task or end goal. In the context of League, destroying the enemy nexus, and you're given a set of tools and options in achieving said goal. Simultaneously, the enemy team is given the same exact thing, with victory boiling down to whichever team can accomplish their objective faster. There's an active force trying to stop you from winning, naturally translating to a loss of agency. You want to win, but you can't. This is why PvP games elicit more frustration than PvE titles. In a PvE game, the player has full control over whether they succeed or fail at their task. Even if the developer sets forth a number of obstacles or opposing forces to prevent you from winning, through strategy or brute force, the player can consistently and feasibly overcome them to make it to the end. But in a PvP title, the obstacle is another player, who just so happens to also be trying to do the same thing you're doing. Since there can only be one winner, the victor will feel the satisfaction of completion, subsequently having a sense of agency, while the loser will experience the disappointment of failing to complete their goal, resulting in a loss of agency and therefore frustration. How this pertains to champions is that obviously they're all different, having different strengths and weaknesses as well as different ways in applying pressure. In a fair fight on equal footing, you're less likely to be frustrated from a loss because your opponent had the same limitations you had. But in a game with close to 170 characters, each with their own unique assortment of skills, it's difficult, if not impossible, to create a level field for evaluation. After all, Champion A can have ABC tools while Champion B has XYZ. For that reason, it's easy for you to attribute a negative experience to the enemy champion having something granting the opposing player an advantage you couldn't overcome, since you don't have the same design. One of the most hated champions in the history of League is Shaco.
Ist das wirklich so? Ist Shaco so verhasst? Shaco ist doch voll cool. Weil sein einziger Cheese ist halt sein schneller erster Clear. Right? Dass er der einzige Charakter ist, der quasi Level 2, Minute 2:30 direkt ganken kann.
That was so vehemently despised that even Shaco mains put Shaco as the most hated champion, implying they're fully aware he was intended to be annoying in every possible sense of the word. Thematically, he's one of the most well-designed champions in the game, of that I'm willing to concede. But experientially, he embodies the bad frustrating. Piloted correctly, Shaco's objective is to force a degenerative game state wherein the enemy team is unable to comfortably respond to any changes in the situation through both physical and psychological means. He's one of those champs where unless you clearly see him on the other side of the map, you have to assume he's always there ready to attack you.
Zum Beispiel der Top-Lane-Gang gerade eben, das ist nicht ein Problem von Shaco, das ist ein Problem von Support, dass die Rolle einfach zu viel machen kann, ohne im Game sein zu müssen. Und Pinkwood ist auch der bekannteste AP-Shaco-Spieler. Und natürlich, irgendwo ist es schon true, dass halt, ich meine, sein Name ist ja literally Chaos, also Shaco, ne? Chaos halt, wenn die Buchstaben vertauschen. Und natürlich will er ein Game State erzwingen, wo halt das Chaos regiert. Und da will er dann natürlich, also will halt smurfen dann in diesem Umfeld. Und das kann schon frustrierend sein. Aber da finde ich, er erzwingt halt einen wilden Assassin-Playstyle, den andere Charaktere nicht so leicht erzwingen können. Aber er macht immer noch ein normales League of Legends draus. Es gibt andere Charaktere, wie zum Beispiel Evelynn Passive, wo wenn sie gedraftet ist, allein weil sie existiert, muss sich jeder anpassen. Einfach nur, weil sie gepickt wurde. Oder das wie Proxy Singed oder sowas wie Roaming Bar Toplane. Sobald das gespielt wird, muss jeder auf der Karte adaptieren. Oder diese Roaming-Jenner-Scheiße, wenn ihr euch erinnert. Das ist frustrierend. Ich weiß nicht, ob ich Shaco da einordnen würde.
Doubles as a long-lasting invisibility, but it's also a blink, making you completely unable to tell which direction he went towards. At least for other invisibility champs like Kha'Zix or Talon, if you're attacking them in front of you, they'll still be in front of you, just invisible. Shaco on the other hand can run away and then use Q, and you have to guess if he blinked further away from you or if he pretended to run away only to get a quick shot back in at your squishy backline. There's also the mental aspect of trying to figure out which of the two Shacos is the real one. Now there are methods of counterplay for hallucinating. Certain debuffs will only apply to the real one, so for example, if you apply a tether to Shaco, it will stay on the real one while the clone doesn't have any, or it's commonly known that if you ping Shaco before he splits, the target ping will still apply to the real one. Most of the time, however, it's extremely hard to tell in the heat of the moment which one is the real one, especially when Shaco uses hallucinate while invisible,
cool.
at which point you can't tell the two apart at all without attacking.
Das war gut gespielt.
It's actually
Also, bist du frustriert, wenn du so outplayed wirst? Ist das frustrating?
hallucinate while invisible, at which point you can't tell the two apart at all with.
Ich finde es geil. Wenn wir sagen, Digga, okay, also, ja, okay. Aber er dodgt deine Q, smurft, er resettet seine Ult in die Reichweite und du greifst dann den Falschen an. Und dann, okay, krass. Ich hätte nicht gedacht, dass das frustrierend ist. Weil mich frustriert wäre halt so Garen, der auf mich raufcued und sich dreht und dann ultet und bin ich tot. Hätte ich jetzt gesagt, das ist frustrating as fuck. Oder halt, du gehst als Top-Laner Mid-Game groupen, Enemy Jungler hat 5 Items mehr als du, lost. Aber das war doch gut.
Without attacking. Conceptually, hallucinate and deceive aren't necessarily the most hazardous moves in the game. People are likely more afraid of other ultimates and Qs than his, but what makes him negatively frustrating is because despite being an assassin, Shaco's unreasonably good at zoning and disrupting enemies, particularly if you go AP Shaco, and those same tools can be used to not only apply pressure, but also escape pressure. Shaco's Jack in the Box takes a moment to set up, but unlike other traps, is untargetable and invincible unless you disable it with a control ward or Oracle Lens, meaning even if you know it's there, you can't do anything about it, and when setting it off, it applies up to a 1.5 second AoE fear with a fair bit of magic damage, especially once again if you go AP Shaco. With him being able to place boxes while invisible, he can use them to either cut off your escape or to secure his own. Ever since Hallucinate was granted a fear on explosion, it went from a mild inconvenience to an active threat that players try to avoid, even if the Shaco player goes AD. Most people don't want to set off the clone because no one wants to willingly get crowd controlled unless you can ignore it like Mundo or Olaf. The problem is, Shaco can typically utilize the clone to make it so you lose if you interact with it, but also lose if you don't interact with it. If you check over the multiple use cases of his Q, W, and ultimate, you may have noticed that Shaco overrides the one universal counterplay of assassins, the first strike. The number one way to counter an assassin is to strike them first. Most assassins are ill-suited for escaping a situation where they're the ones being engaged on. Though most of them can use their mobility to run away, their full effectiveness might be hindered in doing so, letting you continue pursuing them most of the time. To elaborate on this, Evelynn is a fine example of a well-designed frustrating champion. Tons of people hate Evelynn, Demon Shade's among the most aggravating passes in the game, but in fairness, most of that has to do with her coincidentally exploiting the absence of coordination in solo queue. She's very rarely seen in pro play in light of it being a lot easier to play around her when all 5 teammates are communicating and working together. And the reason for that is, Evelynn lives and dies by the element of surprise. It might feel unfair for a champion to be camouflaged indefinitely, especially since you can only cover so much area with 5 control wards, but with the lure taking 2 seconds and change to fully activate, the victim's at least alerted that threat is imminent and can therefore decide what to do next. More often than not, the chance of survival is pretty bleak, but what's important is that they are given that window to either retreat or stand their ground. Furthermore, if Evelynn herself gets caught out, she's at a serious disadvantage. Whiplash is a small gap closer with a burst of speed, but she can't really use that to run away from battle, and though Last Caress does make her blink backwards, it has a clear indication of where she's blinking towards, giving you the chance to chase after her. When Evelynn's on the attack, she might feel like the most bullshit champion in the game. Hate Spike is almost a 200% AP ratio, Whiplash can do like 20% max health damage in the late game, and Allure shreds your magic resist by almost half, making her effectively deal true damage, but this is counterbalanced by her being just as easy to shut down if you attack her first. Bottom line, despite the absurd macro pressure she can exert with her passive, you have agency in shutting her down, practical agency at that. Going back to Shaco for a moment, Shaco not only gives you practically zero indication of him being nearby until he's basically sitting on top of you, but he can force a lose-lose situation by putting a box between you and your escape route, punishing you for running away, while at the same time setting up his clone to discourage you from fighting back since if you get swamped, you dig an even deeper hole for yourself. On the flip side, if you engage on Shaco, the same moves he uses to attack you can also be used to run away. Deceive is equally as effective at running away as it is at engaging. If his pursuers somehow guess where he's blinking to, he can secure his escape by putting down a Jack in the Box, deterring not just one, but any number of attackers given it's an AoE fear. And beyond that, he can set up hallucinate to zone away enemies even more. Worse yet, unlike most assassins who, if they blow their abilities to get out of a bad situation, they usually can't fight, Shaco can switch from defense to offense and vice versa midway through. He can make it look like he's running away when in reality he's blinking to get closer to your squishy ADC. If his bots or clones set off their respective fears, he can turn around and then attack.
Whereas
really
if
Fizz uses playful trickster to jump away, he can't go straight back in. Shaco's gameplay, while not the most kill-heavy like other assassins or even the most impactful, is more frustrating than his peers for the simple reason that he negates your agency. He can gaslight you into thinking nothing you do has any effect whether attacking or retreating. As a reminder, a champion doesn't have to be strong or have a 60% win rate to be frustrating. That being said, that's kind of intentional. Shaco's a badly designed champion in this type of environment, but that's the point. He's the middle finger of League. In other words, he's so badly designed that it makes him perfectly designed. There's no way you can design a psycho killer clown in a way that isn't meant to be tilting to even the most serene players. He just wouldn't be Shaco. So as much as it pains me to say it, Shaco is the bad frustrating, but he's kind of allowed to be because they unironically were trying to make him like that. The same can't be said for a champion like Yuumi. If there's one cast member who can remotely challenge the Demon Jester in Vitriol, it would be her. Calling on the aspect of agency one more time, the reason everyone hates Yuumi is due to her ignoring the one factor that fundamentally keeps all enchanters in check. War crimes, literally. Enchanters are the medics of League, but unlike real life where we have the Geneva Convention that, let's be real, no one actually follows, in League, you're perfectly at liberty to shoot the medic. In most cases, you're actually encouraged to. Soraka, Janna, Lulu, Nami, they can buff their ADC, peel them, heal, or shield them to survive enemy pressure and all that, but in order for them to do so, they have to remain close to the action, uncomfortably so. With no combat pressure of their own, and usually no durability, they have to hope that the allies they're buffing and protecting will be able to kill the enemy faster than they do the same, or they have to hope that the enemy team doesn't consider them a worthwhile target. Enchanters are a broken class on paper. They can take their pressure and then give it to someone else on their team to compound theirs, but in practice, they're kept in check by needing to put themselves at risk to support their team. Little Yuumi is the one enchanter granted immunity from that condition. She can give all the buffs and support to her ally of choice while at the same time being totally unexposed, and it's not like her supportive capability was weaker than what other enchanters were capable of.
Gibt auch keine Welt, in der sie jemals balanced sein kann. Also das, was sie einzigartig macht, macht sie schlecht. Also deswegen, der Champion ist unmöglich gut zu haben. Sollen sie so tot nerven, dass sie nie gespielt werden kann außerhalb von Bot-Games, wo man Leuten vielleicht das Game beibringen kann, die noch nicht so mit MOBA-Erfahrung haben. Aber ja, Yuumi sollte ansonsten einfach tot sein, ne? Als Champion. Gibt nichts Schlimmeres als sie vom reinen Design her. Einfach terrible Champion.
They quote-unquote fixed her back in early Season 13, Yuumi gave arguably more stats, healing, and teamfight pressure than her peers, and again, all while basically never having to expose herself. It's true that if her companion died and she was all by herself, she's the freest kill of all time, but good luck trying to break past the champion empowered by Yuumi. She completely disregarded all the rules the enchanter class had to follow, making her without question the most degenerate champion in the game. She had to get so many nerfs and changes before they decided to hell with it all and gave her a full rework. Release Yuumi had to be by far the most egregious offense of a champion we've ever had the displeasure of witnessing. In all honesty, no enchanters are badly designed because of that universal role. They have to put themselves in harm's way to help their team, while not having much if any self-defense. Yuumi was a living example of what happens when you make an enchanter who's unaffected by that rule. And even though she's not as frustrating to deal with nowadays, people still hate her on general principle, and she will always be the bad frustrating on general principle too, because you can't make a medic that people can't shoot in League. At the end of the day, there are frustrating champions everywhere. I'm sure we all have our own hit list of champs that we wish never existed. Mine is probably longer than most of yours, but the main difference between a champion who's frustrating to play against but fairly designed and one who is poorly designed is if the player has visible and practical agency in shutting them down, just as much as those frustrating champions can shut you down. It's for that reason I consider champions like Teemo and Fizz to actually be well made, despite their infamous legacy. For all the hell Teemo puts you through in lane and then having to play the floor as lava later on, if you get your hands on him, you can snap him like a twig. Same thing with Fizz. People justifiably hate Playful Trickster, but Fizz is one of the most fair assassins in the game because he actually has downtime in between rotations, whereas Yone and Anschauen can fight forever without any loss of pressure. My point is, it's possible for a champion to be well designed, or if nothing else, fairly designed, even though they're frustrating to deal with. So long as you can ensure there's an equal balance of agency between the two players, you can technically make a champion as annoying as you want. Look at Aurora, who just came out last month. You can tell she's going to be a nuisance, but they took the necessary steps to ensure she doesn't feel BS to fight against. So I can, albeit begrudgingly, give credit where credit is due. What about you guys though? Do you agree with my thoughts on good versus bad frustrating, or do you have a counter argument?
Also ich agree nicht komplett mit Shaco, aber mein Chat scheinbar schon, was mich überrascht, ehrlich gesagt. Da habe ich eine ganz andere Wahrnehmung als ihr, was ich interessant finde. Und ja, ansonsten Evelynn, safe frustrierend, ja, so redet Yuumi, keine Frage. Ja, Chat. Ne? What do you think? Auch YouTube. What do you believe?